First of all, tanking has always been part of the NBA. Let's get that out the way.
Sports.
It's sports. I agree with you, Kenny.
Tanking is not the problem. If you try to, quote, solve tanking and ignore that tanking is actually a symptom, you are going to make things worse. You have to go back to the actual problem, not the symptom. The problem is bad teams do not have enough other avenues to get better. They're doing it because they have to.
Following Mark Cuban's admission to tanking and Adam Silver's acknowledgement that this is rampant in the league, the NBA has doubled down on its anti-tanking stance and is firmly committed to attack every aspect of the games that teams may utilize as part of their tanking strategy. If you want to check out the first video on the Mark Cuban, Steph Curry, and Adam Silver fiasco, check out this link at the top right of your screen. That video breaks down the different perspectives and include how the teams have been impacted. This video goes into the changes that Adam Silver is looking to implement in the upcoming season. The impact of these changes, slated to be put in place next season, will change everything about lottery teams and the draft as we know it. Check ball. Commissioner Adam Silver informed the league's 30 general managers on Thursday that the NBA plans to make anti-tanking rule changes for next season. Stakeholders have intensified dialogue about combating tanking. Those aren't my words. They're Adam Silver's, brought to you by Shams. He then followed it up with a list of 7 changes that the NBA will look to implement in order to curb tanking. The list goes like this. First-round picks can be protected only top 4 or top 14 plus. Lottery odds freeze at the trade deadline or a later date. No longer allowing a team to pick top 4 in consecutive years and or after consecutive bottom 3 finishes. Teams can't pick top 4 the year after making conference finals. Lottery odds allocated based on 2-year records. Lottery extended to include all play-in teams, and flattened odds for all lottery teams. So what do these rules mean and how will they affect teams going forward? Firstly, seeing that the rule won't be implemented till next year, the tankers in this season's draft are safe. But let's start with the first rule. First round picks can be protected only top 4 or 14 plus. This means that picks 5 through 13 can no longer be protected, which is the only major change for this rule. So you can't have top 5 protected, top 6 protected, etc. Top 4 picks are usually considered franchise changing, so protecting those picks are still allowed. It makes sense, but why can't teams protect 5 through 13? How does this affect tanking? One of the reasons teams tank is to try to retain a pick they've already traded. A team that traded a top 10 protected pick is incentivized to participate in late season tanking in order to retain their pick if they can't compete after the trade. This is a calculated rule to prevent late season shenanigans by teams in late season tanking onset when they find themselves in a spot where they're not good enough to make the playoffs but too good to keep the pick they traded. Will it stop tanking for this specific reason? Probably not. Teams may just approach the trades a little bit differently. Teams will just adjust to the new trade values. The next rule is that lottery odds freeze at the trade deadline or a later date. This is one we've already discussed on this channel, a rule that I'd proposed back in December of 2025. Teams usually wait until All-Star break to see what type of talent they have and whether or not they can compete in the playoffs. If they can't compete, then they might as well tank to get the best pick instead of being a middling team. This addresses teams that may be perennial lottery teams who just can't seem to get out of the hole and keeping them from competing for only half of the season. One consequence of such a move, however, is that the buyout market could shift dramatically in terms of who may or may not become available. Also, teams could change their evaluation calendar and decide much sooner whether or not they want to tank. Will it stop tanking? While it might curb the habit somewhat, it's possible teams could attempt to tank earlier on in the season. This could backfire, however, as that could restrict growth of good players already on the team if teams are going to tank for more than half the season. So the risk of tanking remains to a degree, but it also means teams have to be more calculated. The third rule is no longer allowing a team to pick top 4 in consecutive years and or after consecutive bottom 3 finishes. And there it is. If it hasn't been obvious before, it is now. It has always been suggested that the league has been controlling the picks and that it's not a true lottery. However, in order to combat tanking, the NBA is now putting in place a control tactic to essentially determine which teams get or don't get a top pick in the draft. In the last 2 decades, 3 teams have benefited from being able to draft top 4 picks in back-to-back years. If you recall, The Cavaliers had 3 number 1 overall picks from 2011 to 2014. Kyrie Irving, Anthony Bennett, and Andrew Wiggins, plus 1 4th pick in Dion Waiters in 2012. The 76ers took over the reins for the next 4 years with 2 number 3 overall picks in 2014 and 2015 with Embiid and Okafor, and 2 number 1 overall picks in 2016 and 17 that resulted in Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz. And finally, the Rockets from 2021 to 2023, drafting Jalen Green with the 2nd overall pick in 2021, Jabari Smith Jr. with the 3rd pick in 2022, and Amen Thompson in 2023 with the 4th overall pick. The rule aims to prevent teams that are tanking in consecutive years to get multiple top picks as a rebuild strategy. Will this stop tanking? Probably not. The lottery is 14 picks deep, not 4, and a 5th pick is still a better opportunity than a 14th pick. The 4th rule is that teams can't pick top 4 the year after making the conference finals. I actually don't really see much of a problem with this rule. It's pretty straightforward. If a team makes the conference finals and suffers a catastrophic injury, a team like, let's say, the current Indiana Pacers, this rule prevents such a team from tanking. The Warriors back in 2020, when they selected James Wiseman the year after making the finals, would not have happened had this rule been in place. A good thing about this rule is that it actually helps players and prevents them from going to a team that might actually not be able to develop them. Top 4 picks would have the opportunity to go to a team that actually needs them and their development to become better. Without this, teams are disincentivized to develop players. Will it stop teams from tanking, however? While it might stop tanking, it won't force teams to keep playing their other healthy superstars in order to keep fans engaged. As long as there's a risk, teams are going to keep sitting their players for rest. If you thought perpetual tanking was bad, let's say for example a team like the Wizards. Rule number 5 states that lottery odds would be allocated based on 2-year records. That's quite interesting for a number of reasons. Combined with any of the other rules, rebuilds would end up taking teams twice as long in order to compete. Worse yet, teams that are bad next season are more likely to be bad for the foreseeable future. So much for parity in the league. Free agents would be much less likely to go to a team they perceive doesn't have much of a future. Teams like the Wizards, who are unable to build through free agents or even in the current draft environment, might find themselves never being able to truly compete. Does this rule prevent tanking? The rule itself doesn't prevent tanking, but seemingly an add-on to Rule 3 where teams can't get top picks in consecutive years. This is saying, tank for 2 years, get 1 great pick, and get 1 not as great pick. This is essentially thinning the number of hands that can dip into the draft basket. Rule number 6. The lottery is now going to include all play-in teams. This means teams that have a shot to make the playoffs also have a shot to make the lottery. This rule sorta kinda counters some of the other rules in terms of not giving the best lottery picks to good teams. Again, this is focusing on picks 5 through 13. Teams that are actually bad and not tanking will be getting punished by having to compete with teams who barely missed the playoffs, potentially due to an injury for a mid-level pick. When you realize that a 7th seed is now considered to be in the lottery drawing, this again counters the idea of putting lottery picks on teams that are already considered to be good teams. Does this stop tanking? Not really. If anything, this just widens the field of teams who can tank. This rule as a standalone might not really mean much, but there is still one more rule left. Even before that, however, we're getting into the territory of potentially just abolishing the draft altogether in favor of free agency. But with the current rules in place, surely they would allow the bad teams to have some redemption with the lottery odds, right? No. Rule number 7 states that the lottery odds will be flattened. This means every team from the 7th seed onwards, a total of 18 teams, will have the same chance of landing the first pick. This isn't just stopping tanking. The lottery is pretty much the entire draft. Those late picks might as well be free agents once you get past the first 10 to 15. But this opens up Pandora's box. The NBA will now be able to do what it did with Dallas as much as they want.
No more lottery. No more Dallas getting Cooper Flag.
Considering the lottery isn't itself public, the league can just offer whichever team the picks in whichever order. This makes it no longer a lottery and basically free agency as determined by the league. At this juncture, the draft might as well be abolished, and for all intents and purposes, it has been. It's just not on paper as such. This also incentivizes teams to tank even in the playoffs. If a team that's clearly top 6 and succumbs to an injury late, all they have to do is lose in the play-in and they have a shot at getting a lottery pick. Does this stop tanking? No. All it did was shift the line that determines what teams participate in tanking. If there's an opportunity to get better value in assets without much of a cost, teams are going to do it. The point of tanking is to eventually get better, so I don't think Commissioner Adam Silver should be so focused on it as teams just end up taking turns, but he does have some support. Matt Ishbia, owner of the Phoenix Suns and Mercury, made a post on Twitter with scathing remarks about teams that tank. This comment was in total opposition to what Mark Cuban said 2 days earlier. Ishbia's comment doesn't go quite as deep and ignores some of the nuances of what's considered tanking. For example, a team shutting down a player isn't necessarily a strategy to tank. Playing unwinnable games adds unnecessary minutes and puts a high and unnecessary risk of injury on star players. Regardless of the anti-tanking rules, this won't change. If there's value in tanking, teams will continue to do it. Let me know your thoughts on the new anti-tanking rules, and thanks for watching. Till next time, swish.